Hey guys, it's Evan with Underhill Bonsai, and welcome back to our Bonsai 101, 102, and now we're going into just 103 of the basics of bonsai, how bonsai trees grow, why bonsai soil is important, and how to care for your bonsai, and so forth. So this video is going to be a little bit different. As I mentioned in the previous video on our soils, I will be going into how fertilizer works inside of the soil and why the soil is important in that aspect, and also refer back to the previous video a few times as well, as far as the soil components and then the types of fertilizers that we use. The interior of this pot is right at 28 inches. And the debari of this tree is somewhere around the visual, because there's some spots where some pieces of the roots come out farther on one side than the other, and it's hard to tell. This tree looks like it's around 18 to 19 inches as far as the root spread goes on the top here. And so this tree requires a lot of soil. And just like I explained before, there's a lot of fibrous roots inside of this soil in here. So underneath here, there's roughly about 2 inches or so. Almost, it's like just shy of 2 inches of soil in here. This pot is pretty thick. And so when you go into a ceramic container like this, you have plenty of insulation. And so the wall is about 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. Going the other direction. I should say it's roughly 3/4 of an inch thick to 1 inch thick, depending on the maker of the containers and whatnot. So like mentioned before, the soil is this all the way through. So this nice particle size soil here of lava, pumice, true grow, and some pine bark left over. That's what this is through and through. So this is a very nice wide container for this tree. This is a bald cypress. So the wider, the shallower, the better, the more moisture retention that we're going to get out of this tree. And so I wanted to go through and explain to you guys why the surface of this is important. And then there's these little traps where moss is kind of mounded up. And then I'm going to talk about moss and the way that fertilizer is affected by that. This is a synthetic fertilizer. So this is a 13-13-13 slow release balanced synthetic fertilizer. And so why I say balanced, we are referring to the chemical makeup of the fertilizer. So I've actually got the fact sheet right here for this particular fertilizer, so I don't say anything out of turn or sound like I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to fertilizers, because we're going to get kind of sciencey here with some of the stuff. So there's nitrogen, phosphate, and potash available in this fertilizer, and there's 13% of each. And then there's a breakdown of all the other things in this fertilizer, such as magnesium, sulfur, boron, copper, iron, magnesium. Oh, that's magnesium. Magnesium and manganesium. Sorry. Molybdenum and zinc. So these are all obviously elements, different breakdown elements of this fertilizer. And so all these different things are very, very important to bonsai and also just plants in general, because nitrogen is what makes the tree grow. Nitrogen is what makes the leaves green and extends. It activates a micronutrient called auxin that actually sends a response telling us that this tree needs to extend, and it needs to send a signal back down to the roots. And that all corresponds with that. Mostly nitrogen is important to foliage plants such as a tree like this, like a bald cypress. This is Taxodium deciduum, if I didn't mention it before. And then the phosphate and the potash, those are for more of micronutrient and root growth, bark, other little things that the tree needs as far as, the phosphate more plays into the reproductive tracts of plants, such as the flower production, which will in turn make fruit. That's why it's so important to have high phosphate and potash in like tomato plants and apples and pears and blueberries and stuff like that. So whatever you're doing with that, so all of those ingredients are important to the trees because they use them in different ways. So just had to make sure I was correct here with this. This is the bag size. We usually sell the 1 pound 2-pound and 5-pound bags on our website. So you can go over to underhillbonsaistore.com, and we can go over under our supplies section, and you'll see this fertilizer available. This is actually a commercial grade fertilizer that we take out of like basically a nursery size bag. So what I mean by that is like the nursery trade. We get this stuff in bulk, and it's actually a very good fertilizer for generic grow nursery stuff. And we bag it up into individual small bags like this for you guys to purchase so that y'all can have some of the best fertilizer on the market. And for reference, this is Carl Pool. So Carl Pool is the brand name of the fertilizer. So for those in the industry, in the bonsai nursery industry, or just in the nursery industry, will be familiar with that name. But yeah, this stuff here, it doesn't react to heat as much as like Osmocote will. Osmocote has a temperature where it kind of just drops off, and then it just dumps everything it has as far as its coating goes, because how synthetic fertilizer works is that there's a coating on all these pieces of fertilizer. All the colors in there, I'm not sure what they all do. I just know that they're coated in the different elements or makeup of the micronutrients that the trees need. And then these little yellow round discs, I know for sure, I know that is actually a soil acidifier particle. So they got a little bit of that scattered in here too. So that gives you a little bit of the copper and the copper sulfate and all that stuff. And that's really good for plants for balancing pH in their soil as well. So this stuff, I wouldn't use too much of this. So this is for growing young plants or building trees. I'll explain to you guys real quick about what that means, and then we're going to move on to some of the organic fertilizers and why that's important here. So synthetic fertilizer, and there's a little bit left in here, and this tree just had some residual synthetic fertilizer left over, and I was using that to get the tree just going. So synthetic fertilizer gives the fertilizer to the tree right there. So there's no waiting. As soon as you water the fertilizer into the soil, it goes straight to the roots. And so there's pros and cons of that. The pro is that if the tree is actively growing, which this one is not right now, then it will grab that fertilizer, and then when it does the nitrogen, when it needs an extension and it starts extending its tips, there will be more of that available, and that tip on this branch will go crazy because there's going to be an excess of it. So it's going to have all that fertilizer it needs. It's going to have root space to fill the pot with roots, and then it'll just take off. I use that to my advantage on younger trees in development. So this tree has only been in training for probably about 4 years. We're going on 5 years now since it's been dug out of the ground. In fact, there is an article, if you go to underhillbonsai.com, if you go to my blog posting, there's actually a couple of blog posts I made about this tree in particular. We'll make sure to put a link in that below in the description so you guys can go back and see what this tree looked like. It looked nothing like this 2 years ago. And so I used that to my advantage when it had no branches, synthetic fertilizer, and I just made it throw like crazy. And when I say throw, I mean like throw branches. I mean like just put branches all over. So I'm going to give it a little rotation so you guys can kind of see that. It's got a pretty serious lean back there, but did that on purpose. But yeah, y'all can see branches all the way around. Nice, healthy tree. No voids. You can't even see where right here. That's where I originally cut the tree and carved it. Right there. That right there. That's where I carved the tree. And the wound is nearly rolled over to the point where it's about to be healed completely. That was done in the 2 years that I was building this tree. And I let the top of this build out. You guys can actually see in here, there's a branch right here. It's not very easy to see because of the way that I was able to hide it in the canopy. I covered up this wound with it. And unless I didn't tell you guys that, you wouldn't have known how this happened here. But that's one of the tricks of the trade there of making a bald cypress into a bonsai after collection. And I'm really glad that this tree is doing so well. And the synthetic fertilizer has done its job. If you guys can see, this bald cypress has nice, they're not the smallest leaves in the world on this bald cypress, but they're workable. They're not this long, which I've seen on a bald cypress, but they are instead roughly from, about an inch and a half to some of them exceed that 2 inch a little bit, but not that many of them. The majority of the leaves on this tree are nice and they're short and compact, and you've actually got good layering happening through this tree. So it's filled in really nicely, and I'm liking the way that I can cut this crown and get that padding that everybody loves in bonsai a lot. But that won't be really done until next year when the leaves fall off of this and I do a nice tight refinement on this tree. So now that I've got the synthetic fertilizer done here, and it's actually starting to go into fall. At the time of this recording, we're in mid to late October, so we're starting to get a little bit of fall color, this tree is doing it beautifully right now. Just in 2 weeks, if we shot this 2 weeks from now, this tree would be golden colored, like golden yellow. But the retraction of the chlorophyll in this is starting to go really slow because I've slowed everything down. We stopped using synthetic because if we keep using synthetic fertilizer, the tree will keep pushing big leaves, long shoots. It'll start growing out of control, where when a tree gets more adapted to being a bonsai and not a pre-bonsai, it's not raw anymore, it is becoming a specimen bonsai now, I'm slowing things down. So we're going to go into why organic fertilizer works in the soil versus the synthetic. We got two different brands here of fertilizer. These are both organic, and they're both done slightly differently. So the one that I use a lot for my trees is the pellet. So this is Green Balance. This is produced by Stone Lantern. And they are a slow release fertilizer as well, but they're all organic. And I'm about to just go into what that really is here in a second. This is called a rapeseed cake. So this is basically the same thing as this, but they're these little cakes. They look like little, like brownie cake things before you put them in the oven, basically. I don't do a lot of baking, but whenever people make organic fertilizer, they normally refer to it as making cakes, because we take stuff like bone meal, cottonseed meal, blood meal, and then we'll add in things like bat guano or earthworm casing or other organic materials that will break down and become different things that trees need. So all the nitrogen, the potash, the phosphate, all of that is present, and so there's a lot of other things that will grow in organic fertilizers that we can't get in the synthetic necessarily. And so the reason why we're talking so long-winded here and kind of making our way back around to the soil, the pumice and the lava in here work with the fertilizer to capture that nutrients. With synthetic fertilizers, when you water, it washes straight through because it's so much so fast. It is basically a fertilizer dump. And so when you water this, it's like taking too many vitamins for us. When you take too many vitamins, your system just flushes it. You don't need it. And your body takes what it needs. For organic, because this holds so much moisture, there is a cation exchange that happens in the soil and becomes that living soil that I had discussed in the previous video. And so these organic fertilizers, they do something that's magical, but yet kind of disgusting, to be honest. So you'll see these sitting on the surface, and then they'll have these baskets. They go over the top of these, and they contain them so they don't crumble and fall apart. The disgusting part is that they start turning into mush. Flies, hate to say it, but like maggots and stuff, and other little bugs get in there, and they start just kind of decomposing, and it starts falling apart. But that's a good thing because everything's working together. Little worms and flies and stuff will get in there, and then that breaks down, and all those ingredients break down, and they go into the soil and they seep into it. And I call it kind of like it's like a fungus festival in there, basically. Like all the stuff that we want happens in the soil at that time, and then it takes a lot longer for that organic material to become available to the tree. And when a tree is old and we're trying to grow it slower, it slows everything down, and then the tree gets it when it actually absolutely needs it. Not right now like synthetic. Synthetic just, there it is right there. So I had mentioned a few moments ago that we were choking this of fertilizer. What I mean by that, and it sounds more drastic than it really is. We're not torturing the tree. It's just that the tree has gotten so much fertilizer before this point that it has just been growing and growing, and we've been asking it to make these branches go from little twigs to, right over thumb size for some of the branches in here to kind of thicken them up. And now I'm like, slow down, like hold back, pull back on the energy. And there's already, like I said, there's synthetic fertilizer in here, so there's synthetic residual fertilizer in the soil still. And then to kind of help wean the tree off of that synthetic, we've been watering it with fish emulsion. So fish emulsion is another thing that you can pick up from the store. It's just basically it's fish parts. It's another thing where I told you guys earlier, like it's the gross part of organic fertilizer, is that it's just parts of fish industry stuff, like the heads and the guts and all that, unfortunately. And they grind it up and they put it into a usually it's like a jug, like a 1 gallon jug, and then you cut it with water. Either do a watering can. I use a siphon at my house, so I siphon fish emulsion and water straight into my trees, and I actually water with fish emulsion all year round, and I never give them straight water. I always have something in there like vinegar to cut the pH, or fish emulsion to supplement like constant organic feed. So that organic feed that this tree is getting, it's still giving it what it needs. So the green in the tree is still there. So it's not lacking in color. We don't have yellowing or chlorotic. Chlorotic is whenever you see a tree and it's like yellow, and it's the buds and the extensions of the buds are all pathetic looking, and they're like limped over and they're just discolored looking. That's chlorotic. There's no chlorotic leaves in this tree. In fact, this tree has been in the sun, the full sun, all year, this entire year since it's been potted in here and fed fish emulsion, and it's this nice dark, almost bluish green color, which this is exactly what I wanted for this tree this year, and I'm happy that we were able to pull it back. Slowing this tree down, I've actually got wire on about, let me check with my eyes real quick in here. Looks like I've got about 25% of this tree still has wire on it. And so I wired this tree out at the beginning of last year. And then over time, I've taken wire off and then put wire back on. But some of this wire is still from almost 1.5 years ago. So I'm just inspecting it with my eyes right now. I'm just using the chopstick to kind of direct the camera view here. But yeah, the wire for the most part, back here it's cutting in a little bit, but not too bad, honestly, because we have slowed the fertilizer down on this tree. The cut in on the wire has slowed. And I want to leave this wire on here as long as I possibly can. And here's one of the things about bulb cypresses is that people will say, you put the wire on the tree and then you're going to leave it on there for like 2 or 3 months and you got to take it off because it's going to ruin the tree. The way we've treated this tree, we've fertilized it and we've watered it, it has not cut into those branches in that 1.5 years on some of these pieces. Now, don't get me wrong, back here, there is a space and there's a way that I wired this branch to have it not cut in back here. So there's a technique to do that here that I would have to show you guys with no leaves on this tree. But there is a way to save this without it getting messed up. But that's the biggest concern with bonsai, especially deciduous trees, because we don't want to see cut in on our branches. So the organics helps us slow the tree down and prevent wire cut in as well. And then in turn, we get a really healthy branch. I want to just go in, this is going to be a hot take on this technique of developing bald cypress, because bald cypresses, and this applies to the fertilizer thing, so I'm not going too far off track here. Bald cypresses are looked at it as a tree that people will grow out really fast, and then they'll trim it back really hard, and they'll grow it out really far and trim it back again, and again, and again, and they'll lose control of the vigor in the tree. Because of fertilizer, because they leave the tree in standing water for too long, and et cetera, et cetera. This branch that I was just showing you guys right here, my goal, now that I'm doing synthetic fertilizer, is to not have to trim this branch. And what happens is whenever we don't trim, we don't ask the tree to back bud or push for more nutrients than it needs. When it becomes an older bonsai, old trees in nature are not, like a windstorm doesn't come in and just completely shatter the tree every year. It happens in Louisiana like almost every year, honestly, hurricane season. depending on the location, you know, if it's on the shoreline or not. But I can take this branch on this cypress and massage this branch to where it'll start kind of occurring where I need it to. See, it was here. Now it's kind of dropped down, and I can break the fibers in this branch and drop these branches down. And so instead of the branch going straight up, it'll come down. And if you guys visit the nursery, y'all might see a couple of bulb cypresses. Another insider secret, that the branches are drooping down. That is to keep the vigor in that branch, but not cut it back and encourage it to overexert what it needs as far as fertilizer and water. So just put it out there. I know some people watch these videos and they get some bulb cypress information. There's a little Easter egg for y'all. That's a great little technique. So if you guys are interested in developing bulb cypresses, I've done this technique with probably a dozen bulb cypresses over the past year. And I'd like to thank Guy Guidry actually brought this up and has been kind of pounding it into my head that I should stop trimming my trees and let them grow instead. And this has gone a long ways, especially when we're going to organics. Let's talk about moss and fertilizer and why they actually coincide. And then you see a lot of, let's see, for instance, if you go up to the Portland area or the Seattle area, Tacoma, Seattle, and you see bonsai nurseries, bonsai collections, I've been up there, and one of the things that's really unique about those collections is they always are blanketed in moss, like green, healthy moss. The moss here is just happening by itself. So this is clogged portions of the soil. And for a bald cypress, I'm not super worried about that. The more moisture, the better, because it's a bald cypress, and I don't really care about that. On other trees like pine trees and junipers, I would be really concerned if I saw this would just be a moisture trap. But for organic fertilizer and other purposes, this is actually very nice. I like this a lot. And so what I'll do is you can get this at most Home Depot, Walmart, wherever. So this is just your orchid moss that you see available. This stuff is gold. And when I say that, you would think like, how does this have anything to do with bonsai? This is orchid stuff. It's actually marketed as orchid moss or soil, but it's actually just sphagnum moss. What I usually do is then, I'm sorry for the bucket, it's had a lot of use. But then I'll wet it down and cut it up with my scissors, and I'll get it to, you know, it's still a little long. I still like it to stay long. I'll cut it just a little bit with my scissors. Where you see bonsai soil, I usually go in and I will coat the surface of this with my orchid moss. And I'm only going to do a small section of this because this tree needs a do-over. In the wintertime, when our leaves fall off of our trees, it's a good time to reset the soil surface, is what I call it. And so when you use organics, which I'm about to apply to this tree, it will, this stuff like this moss, like this is starting to mound up pretty high over on this side. Whereas I'm going to take this, and there's even a section here where this root died back and it's starting to grow a new lifeline or a live vein down into the soil. This is actually a great spot to put this moss as well, because it'll encourage more moisture in this area as well to help rebuild this. And I'm not worried about it because it's going to survive. It's obviously surviving. But I will put this in there because this will encourage feeder roots to exist in this section of the soil. So the sun will dry the first inch or so of the soil out, and then feeder roots will not really want to grow in there. And if you remember right, we have about 1.75 inches to 2 inches roughly of soil. So that means some of this could be void, when it is. If you dig down with your finger, see, I'm digging down there. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, so that crater right there, there's roots in there, but they're a little ways down. So in order to get those roots to come up to the surface, I have to draw them up by providing them with moisture. And so what happens here is we call this a cap. This is a cap on the soil to not only encourage feeder roots to come up and occupy this soil space, but also when we put our cakes on there, when we put a fertilizer cake on there, and this tree, for a cake that size, I'd have to use this entire bag, to be honest, too, because there's so much surface area here. So I would space it out like every 6 inches or so. There would be a fertilizer cake around the entire perimeter of this pot. And so I would put this here, and then I would put one of those cages or a basket over it so that birds and critters don't pick at it or get to them. But I would put this on there, and this moss will also break down this fertilizer cake and make it start doing all that gross stuff that we were talking earlier, where it starts like getting all funky, and then it seeps down into the soil here, and that becomes a hot spot for nutrients and nutrient uptake for feeder roots. So those fine feeder roots will get into this, and then in turn they will be instantly rewarded with organic materials ready to go. So organic materials are great for bonsai because it slows everything down and it lets us get smaller leaves, shorter internodes. We have to repot less often, we have to wire less often, and we have to trim less often. With all those key things in mind, if you didn't have to repot your tree every 2 years, if you didn't have to trim your tree multiple times a year, if you didn't have to wire your tree like some people with bald cypresses will be like, wire the tree, 2 months later take it off, wire it again. That just sounds monotonous. What if you could take it that easy? The answer is organics. And I hope this encourages some people to take organics more seriously, because organics are obviously better for the tree. It's like eating a clean diet for us. That's pretty much the gist of it. Is synthetic fertilizers are for growing raw stock, making pre-bonsai, building trees out. And once they're built, once you're past that point and you want to make the tree into a better bonsai, we start using organics. And like I had said before, closing remarks on the fertilizer, you can go over to underhillbonsaistore.com and you can go under our supplies and go to see our fertilizer section. We sell both of the things I just showed you here. The synthetic, the 13-13-13, it's a great product. I'm not downplaying it because it's just for growing. If you're growing raw stock, and a lot of people are in the United States, it's the best next thing you can get. And then for, as far as organics, I have preferences. You know, play around, see what you like. If you are against your garden getting all smelly, then don't use fish emulsion, but your trees will thank you for it, I promise. Well, thank you guys so much for watching the third video in our bonsai education series. Make sure you guys like, follow, share, and put questions in the comments. If you watched this far into the video, thank you so much. And if you share it, comment, that goes a long way in the algorithm of things and kind of helping move things along. And also, if you give me some comments and questions, I will answer them in the next video, as I've done in some of the other videos on this channel. And so on the next upcoming video that we will be doing, I will be doing fall wiring and refinement techniques, because when we visit you guys next month, hopefully most of my deciduous trees will have dropped their leaves, if not have some beautiful fall color, and I can go through and explain how that works, and we can start refining some nice bonsai trees together. But you guys have a great time with y'all's trees this season, and I'll see you on the next one.